There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't just cut, it shatters. Not loudly, not all at once, but piece by piece, like a mirror dropped in silence, splintering under the weight of trust that was never meant to be broken. You remember that moment, don't you? When everything you believed about them, their loyalty, their love, their words, crumbled into something unrecognizable. You stood there, stunned, trying to pick up the shards of yourself, and they walked away. Or worse, they smiled as they did. This wasn't just disappointment. This was spiritual vandalism. It was the quiet destruction of something sacred, your faith in them, your belief that good intentions mattered, your certainty that love, loyalty, or friendship meant something. They didn't just betray you, they used your heart as leverage. And they thought you wouldn't survive it. Have you ever wondered how someone can share your table, hear your laughter, hold your secrets, and still choose to wound you? What kind of emptiness lives inside a person who turns their back not on a stranger, but on someone who trusted them blindly? But here's the strange thing. Betrayal doesn't end you, it initiates you. It forces you into a confrontation with the rawest parts of yourself, the brokenness, the anger, the confusion. You descend into a kind of emotional exile and the world around you stops making sense. People say, move on, as if it's just a switch, but they don't understand. Betrayal doesn't just create pain, it creates doubt in others, in yourself, in the very meaning of relationship. And still, you rose. You see, the ones who betrayed you had a plan to watch you crumble, to enjoy the spectacle of your ruin. They fed on your silence. They assumed you'd bury your pain, question your worth, and collapse under the weight of their cruelty. But what they didn't see was what happened in the dark, the rebuilding, the silent war, the grit it took just to breathe, to keep going, to face yourself in the mirror and say, I'm still here. And slowly, without theatrics, you became stronger. Isn't it strange how people assume that if they hurt you deeply enough, they win, as if destruction is power? But the truth is the power lies not in the breaking, but in the surviving. You didn't retaliate. You didn't beg. You didn't prove your worth to those who couldn't see it. You walked through fire, quietly, with dignity. And now, the storm has turned. The silence has spoken. The consequences long overdue are unfolding. They thought betrayal would break you. Now they're the ones unraveling, haunted by the weight of what they did, not because you wished them harm, but because that's the way truth works. It doesn't scream, it doesn't rush, but it always arrives. So ask yourself, what did you learn when they left? What did you become when you had no one else to lean on? Who are you now that the illusions have burned away? Because the story isn't about your betrayal. The story is about your becoming. The fall was theirs, but the rise, it was yours. They turned their back, but you turned inward. There's a moment, sharp, quiet, unforgettable, when you realize they've turned their back on you. It doesn't come with thunder. It comes with silence, a sudden withdrawal, a change in tone, a look that says, I'm no longer with you. And in that moment, something inside you collapses. Because this wasn't just anyone. This was someone you trusted, someone you loved, someone you would have gone to war for. And they walked away as if you meant nothing. Do you remember how cold that felt? How your chest tightened? Not from anger, but from confusion. You kept replaying their words in your head, trying to make sense of it, wondering what you did wrong, how someone could shift so fast, how loyalty could turn into betrayal without a warning. You wanted to scream, to cry, to shake them and ask why, but instead you were left in silence, alone, sitting with a storm inside your heart and no one to help you navigate through it. And that's where the real journey began. Not out there with them, but deep inside you. When they turned their back, you had no one to lean on, no explanations, no apologies, just the echo of betrayal ringing in your ears. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. You turned inward. It wasn't a choice. It was survival. You see, when people leave you at your lowest, they think they've broken you. They think abandonment will hollow you out, leave you gasping for air, chasing their validation. But they forget one thing. There's a strength that lives only in solitude. There's a kind of fire that only ignites when no one is left to comfort you. And that fire, that came alive inside you. And that in your loneliness, you found your truth. You peeled away every false narrative they tried to place on you. You questioned everything, yes, but in the ruins of that questioning, you began to rebuild brick by brick, tier by tier, not to prove anything to them, but to rescue yourself. Because when someone you love betrays you, it feels like death. But what really dies is the illusion. The illusion that they ever truly valued you. The illusion that their presence defined your worth. And when that illusion shattered, you met yourself. Not the version they manipulated. Not the version that begged for crumbs. But the version that stood up, bleeding but unbroken. And that version of you? That's who they never expected to meet. You didn't retaliate. You didn't chase. You didn't try to make them see your worth. Instead, you faced your own soul. You sat with your grief. You allowed the pain to speak, and through that pain, you found power. So many people fear being alone after betrayal. They believe that without the ones who hurt them, they'll be empty. But you learned that emptiness is not a curse. It's a canvas. And in that space where they used to be, you created something far more valuable, yourself. You stopped explaining. You stopped justifying. You stopped shrinking to fit the shape of people who never deserved you. And while they were busy turning away, you were busy turning inward, healing, growing, remembering who you were before they distorted your reflection. And now they wouldn't recognize you if they tried, because the person they betrayed, that person doesn't exist anymore. You've changed, and not just changed, you've awakened. You've seen what silence can teach. You've tasted the kind of strength that only heartbreak reveals. And the most ironic part, they walked away believing they had power over your story. But all they did was spark the beginning of the chapter where you became the author. Your pain built power. They can't understand. They thought the pain they caused would leave you shattered, permanently damaged, stuck in a version of yourself that couldn't recover. They thought the wounds they left would bleed forever, that you'd be defined by them. What they never expected was that you'd build something from that pain. Something they can't comprehend, something they could never destroy. Pain is strange. It doesn't just hurt, it transforms. At first, it suffocates you. You can't sleep, you can't eat. You walk through your days with a weight on your chest that no one else can see. Smiles become masks. Conversations become exhausting. The world keeps moving like nothing happened, while inside you're falling apart. And the worst part? They don't care. They're out there laughing, living, acting as if you never mattered. You gave them everything, your heart, your trust, your loyalty, and they took it as weakness. They mistook your kindness for foolishness, your patience for desperation. They thought hurting you would be the end of your light. But what they didn't realize is that people like you don't stay down for long. Because while they laughed at your tears, something was building in you. In the quiet, in the dark, in the moments when no one saw you crying into your pillow, praying for strength, whispering to God to just help you make it through the next day, that pain started turning into power. Slowly, quietly, you began to see things differently. You started to notice who was truly there for you and who only showed up when it benefited them. You began cutting ties, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You started protecting your space, your peace, your heart. And the person you were before, the one who would have begged, explained, and cried for answers, began to disappear. In their place, someone else was rising. That rise didn't come with applause. It came with silence. It came with discipline, with choosing not to call, with choosing not to explain, with choosing every day to live without them, even when everything in you wanted to scream out in pain. And that choice, that quiet decision to move forward, that was power. You started building. Maybe you changed your habits. Maybe you went after your goals harder than ever. Maybe you looked in the mirror and decided to never again let someone else define your worth. Your pain became the fuel. Your heartbreak became the lesson. Every night you cried became another reason to stand tall the next morning. And now, from the outside, they might say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're cold, but they have no idea. They didn't watch you claw your way out of the emotional grave they buried you in. They didn't see the nights you spent staring at the ceiling, wondering how it all went so wrong. They didn't witness your resurrection. They only see the strength now, the distance, the glow. But they can't understand where it came from because they've never had to build themselves from scratch. They've never had to rise after being destroyed by someone they loved. They've never had to gather every broken piece of their soul and decide to become more, not less. That's what you did. And the best part? You didn't need revenge. You didn't need validation. You didn't need to make a scene. Your healing was the loudest thing you never said. Your growth became the whisper that now haunts them. They didn't expect you to survive, and they never imagined you'd thrive. Their lies are now their prison. When they lied to you, they did it so effortlessly, as if your trust meant nothing, as if your heart was a game. They spun their stories with calm expressions and confident words, all while knowing the truth sat rotting in the shadows. And you believed them, not because you were naive, but because you were loyal. You wanted to believe. You chose to believe. Because love in your heart was never built on suspicion. It was built on hope. But lies are never lightweight. They don't disappear after they're spoken. They live, they linger, and eventually they rot everything around them. The person who lies may walk freely for a while. They may laugh, enjoy their days, live like nothing happened. But inside, they've already locked themselves into a prison that only time will reveal. Do you remember the moment you started sensing something was off? Not because they told you, but because you felt it in the way they looked away when you asked a simple question, in how they changed the subject when you sought clarity, in how they got defensive over details that should have brought comfort, not confusion. The truth wasn't just hidden, it was buried, and your instincts were screaming, but your heart didn't want to believe it. That's the cruelty of being lied to by someone you love. It doesn't just shatter your trust in them, it makes you question yourself. It makes you feel foolish, like you should have known better. It makes you doubt your ability to see clearly. And that internal chaos, that self-blame, that's part of the pain they'll never understand. But here's what they didn't realize. Lies always collect debt, and the interest is steep. While you were crying, they were covering their tracks. While you were losing sleep, they were sleeping beside new lies, stacking them up, thinking they'd never come crashing down. But lies have a way of becoming loud. They echo. They repeat themselves in different voices. And sooner or later, the weight of keeping the truth buried becomes unbearable. Now, they're trapped. Trapped by their own web of deceit. Afraid of the day someone asks the wrong question. Scared that the mask will slip. Paranoid that their own guilt will be exposed through a word, a look, a reaction. They're no longer at peace, not because you're in their life, but because truth is. Every time they see your name, every time they hear your voice, every time someone mentions your strength, it rattles them. Not because you're trying to hurt them, but because your growth shines a light on their darkness. And the truth they tried to bury, it's starting to claw its way back to the surface. You're not the one imprisoned anymore. They are. Because when you lie to someone who gave you nothing but truth, you don't just break a relationship, you break something inside yourself. You kill the part of your soul that could have held love honestly. And once that part is gone, all that's left is pretending, masking, running, forever looking over your shoulder, wondering when it will all fall apart. That's the life they've chosen now. You might not see their suffering posted online. You won't always hear about their regrets. But believe this, when someone builds their world on lies, every step forward feels unstable. Every success tastes hollow. Every smile hides fear. They may have escaped your life, but they're not free. And you You're not the broken one anymore. They are. They laughed at your fall. Now they fear your rise. They thought it was funny. Your pain, your confusion, your silence, the way you stumbled after they pulled the rug out from under you. They shared smirks behind your back, maybe even celebrated your downfall like it was some kind of twisted entertainment, as if your heartbreak was a punchline, as if your trust, your tears, your breakdowns were nothing more than weakness for them to mock. They didn't just walk away, they watched you fall and enjoyed it. It's a hard truth to swallow, isn't it? That someone you once held so close, someone you defended, protected, and loved, could take pleasure in your suffering. It wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty. They weren't content with just leaving. They wanted you broken. They wanted the satisfaction of seeing you lost without them. They wanted you to believe you were nothing without their presence, their approval, their love. You were supposed to beg. You were supposed to chase. You were supposed to fall apart so completely that you'd never find your footing again. And maybe for a moment you did. Maybe you cried yourself to sleep night after night. Maybe you walked around pretending to be okay while everything inside you was in pieces. Maybe your confidence vanished, your smile disappeared. Maybe you questioned if you'd ever feel whole again. And while you were drowning in silence, they laughed. But something happened that they never prepared for. You got up, not with noise, not with revenge, not with anger, but with clarity. Because the thing about being at your lowest is it strips everything away. It shows you who you really are when no one is clapping. It reveals your strength in its rawest, most unfiltered form. And once you saw who you were without them, you started to remember your worth. You began to rise quietly, day by day, painfully, powerfully. You started taking care of yourself, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. You started to detach, not just from the person who hurt you, but from the belief that you ever needed them to begin with. You created new routines, new goals, new visions of who you could become, and not a single part of that vision had them in it. And now they see you thriving, glowing, moving differently. You don't talk like you used to. You don't reach out anymore. Your eyes carry peace, not desperation. Your voice has strength, not longing. And suddenly, the one who once laughed at your pain feels something they didn't expect. Fear that you're doing better without them. Fear that they no longer hold power over you. Fear that you've become someone they no longer have access to. They fear your silence now, because your silence says everything. It tells them that you've healed, that you've accepted what happened, that you don't need closure, validation, or apologies. It tells them you're not coming back. And that terrifies them more than any words ever could. They can pretend all they want, post pictures, tell stories, act your absence speaks louder than their presence ever did. There's a silence that echoes louder than any words ever could. The silence of someone who no longer shows up, no longer explains, no longer tries. That silence, it's yours, and it's deafening. They thought your presence was a given, that no matter how they treated you, you'd always be there. They got used to your kindness, took your loyalty for granted. They believed you'd never walk away because they confused your love with weakness. They thought you needed them more than they ever needed you. But now, you're gone. Not dramatically, not out of revenge, but with finality. You stopped calling, you stopped checking in, you stopped showing up for people who never bothered to show up for you. And that quiet withdrawal, that's what haunts them now. You see, people often don't realize the weight of your presence until it becomes your absence. They don't value your light until the room grows cold without it. They never noticed how much warmth you brought, how much effort you gave, how much peace you carried, until you were no longer around to offer it. And now, in the spaces you once filled, there's emptiness. It's in the little things, the phone that no longer lights up with your name, the messages that go unanswered, the moments they reach to share something and realize you're not there anymore. The silence you left behind wraps around their thoughts like a ghost, reminding them of everything they lost but never truly appreciated. They once believed they could replace you, that someone else could take your place. someone easier, someone who wouldn't ask for honesty, loyalty, or depth. But they're learning now, slowly, painfully, that surface level replacements can't fill the void left by a soul that loved deeply and gave sincerely. And what's worse, you didn't just walk away, you healed. You didn't stay bitter. You didn't wish them harm. You simply moved on. You chose your peace, your future, your worth. And that's what cuts the deepest. Not that you're gone, but that you're thriving in your absence. That your life didn't collapse without them. It got better, lighter, freer. They scroll through your posts now, watching from a distance. They hear your name in conversations. They see the glow in your eyes that wasn't there when you were trying so hard to hold on to someone who didn't value you. And with every reminder of your presence, they're forced to confront the truth. They had something extraordinary, and they lost it. Because while they were busy taking you for granted, you were learning a lesson, a painful one, a necessary one. You realize that love isn't proven by how much you suffer for someone, that loyalty doesn't mean staying where you're not respected, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. And now that you're gone, everything feels different to them. They might pretend they don't care, laugh with friends, post like they're unbothered, but inside there's a discomfort they can't shake, an emptiness they can't fill, a voice in the back of their mind whispering, you pushed away someone who truly cared, and now they're never coming back. They're learning that your silence is not indifference, it's clarity, it's peace, it's power, because the truth is, they could talk for hours and it still wouldn't match the message your absence delivers in just a moment. And that message is loud enough to follow them everywhere. They gave you pain, but you found purpose. They thought the pain they gave you would paralyze you, that it would define you, that it would leave you stuck in the moment they walked away, the moment they betrayed you, the moment they made you feel small and disposable. But something happened that they never saw coming. You turned that pain into purpose. Because pain, as unbearable as it is, can become the sharpest blade of transformation. At first, it was all-consuming. The weight of what they did settled in your chest like concrete. You couldn't breathe the same, couldn't think clearly. Every memory felt tainted. You questioned every word, every gesture. Was any of it real? Did they ever care? You doubted yourself, not because you were weak, but because their actions made you feel like you were the problem. That kind of emotional betrayal breaks something deep. It doesn't just wound. It disorients. It makes you question your own value. You feel invisible, replaced, forgotten. And they walked away like it was nothing. They gave you that pain without blinking. But pain, real raw pain, has a strange quality. It digs deep. It forces you to go places inside yourself that you never wanted to go. It strips you down to the bones of your identity. And when there's nothing left but hurt, that is where the rebuilding begins. Because when you've lost everything you were holding on to, when the people you thought you could live without walk away, you come face to face with something powerful. You. That's when the shift happens. You start asking harder questions, not about them, but about yourself. What am I doing here? What kind of life do I want to build? What do I deserve that I've been settling for? These aren't easy questions. They come with tears, long nights, and a silence that most people are too afraid to sit with. But you didn't run. You stayed in the pain. And because you did, you started to see something forming beneath the surface. You realized the betrayal was not just something that happened to you. It was something that would shape you, that the pain they caused would become the very reason you would rise. It became your drive, your clarity, your motivation to stop handing your power to people who only took advantage of it. You started walking differently, not with arrogance, but with intention. You began choosing peace over chaos, truth over fantasy, integrity over appearance. You started to let go of what no longer aligned, not out of bitterness, but because you were finally seeing what you truly needed. And this new path wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was steady, quiet, sacred. You began pouring your energy into things that actually mattered. Maybe you returned to something you once loved, art, faith, a dream you put aside. Maybe you took the risk to build a business, chase a calling, or simply stand up for yourself in ways you never dared to before. Whatever it was, it came from the ashes of the pain they left behind. And now, while they're still chasing temporary thrills, fake friends, or the next person to feed their ego, you're building something lasting. They gave you pain, but you found purpose. They tried to reduce you, but you expanded. What they broke in you gave birth to the version of you they were never prepared to meet. And now, without you even trying, your growth has become a reflection of their loss. Your strength has become a silent judgment on their weakness. Your peace has become a mirror, and they can't stand to look into it. Because when they see you now, they're not just seeing the person they left, they're seeing the person they could have stood beside, but chose to hurt instead. And that truth stings. Because while they gave you pain and expected you to drown in it, you built a life that makes that pain worth it. You didn't just survive it, you transformed through it. And they can't claim any part of that journey. Not your strength, not your healing, not your purpose. You found it all, in spite of them. Now they're the ones looking for closure. There was a time when you were the one left staring at the ceiling in the dark, consumed by the silence they left behind. You were the one who couldn't make sense of what happened, who replayed every conversation, every moment, trying to figure out how love turned into absence. You were the one waiting for an apology that never came, for closure that never arrived, for some final piece of the puzzle that would help you breathe again. They moved on so quickly, didn't they? As if you were a chapter they had finished reading, with no intention of revisiting. They smiled while you cried. They lived while you barely held yourself together. And that imbalance, that brutal contrast, made the pain even worse. Because how could someone you loved so deeply treat you like you never mattered? But time has a strange way of turning the page, even when you don't feel ready. And something began to shift, not overnight, but quietly, over weeks and months. Slowly, your soul began to reclaim what it lost. Slowly, your tears began to wash away not just the pain, but the illusions. And little by little, you stopped waiting. You stopped needing answers from people who were never honest in the first place. And while you let go, they started to feel the weight. At first, it was subtle, a dream, a memory, a song that reminded them of what once was, a moment of silence too loud to ignore. Maybe they laughed it off, shrugged it away, but it kept happening. Something in them started to ache, and not because they missed having you, but because they started realizing what they gave up. You see, when people betray you, when they discard you, they believe in the moment that they've won, that they've broken something that can't be repaired, that they've moved on to something better, easier, more convenient. But what they never understand is the full cost of what they've done until it's too late. And now they're the ones searching. They may never admit it. They may not have the courage to say the words, but deep inside, they're reaching for the very closure they denied you, wondering what went wrong, wondering if you ever really loved them. And if you did, how they lost that love, wondering how they could have played it so wrong that the one person who would have stood by them through anything is now nowhere to be found. That ache they carry now, that's their reckoning. They scroll through your social media trying to see if you've moved on. They reread old messages they once ignored. They think about calling, about texting, about sending just one message to check in, but they don't. Not because they don't want to, but because they fear what your silence now means. They fear hearing nothing back. They fear discovering that you've outgrown the place they left you in. And the irony? They never gave you closure. They walked away and left you with questions that burned in your chest like fire. But now the roles have reversed. Now they're the ones with questions. Now they're the ones feeling the sting of absence, the disorientation of loss, the weight of what was once in their hands and now is gone for good. And that's the part they never considered, that closure isn't something they could withhold from you, because closure wasn't something you needed from them. It was something you gave yourself. You healed without the apology. You accepted without the explanation. You moved on without the final conversation. And now they sit with the very silence they once imposed on you. But it hits different now because the silence no longer belongs to the wounded. It belongs to the one who inflicted the wound. They're the ones pacing now. They're the ones thinking of what they'd say if they ever got the chance. They're the ones imagining what it would be like to be in your life again. But that door, the one they walked out of, is no longer open. They handed you pain, but you turned it into peace. And now, while you build and grow and walk in strength, they're left behind, wondering how they lost something they never truly understood until it was gone. Look at you now, not just surviving, but standing. Not just standing, but walking with strength, with clarity, with purpose. And not because someone came to save you, not because they apologized, not because they returned to fix what they broke, but because you saved yourself. You rose from a place they never expected you to escape. You gathered the broken parts of your soul, the pieces they left scattered without care, and you created something unshakable out of it. You turned betrayal into wisdom. You turned heartbreak into fuel. You turned abandonment into independence. And every tear you once cried, it watered the ground you now stand on. They thought they ended you, but what they ended was their access to a version of you they never truly valued. You see, it was never you who lost. It was never you who failed. It was never you who should carry the weight of guilt, confusion, or regret. They lost a heart that was real in a world full of fakes. They lost loyalty in a time when most people switch sides when it's convenient. They lost someone who would give them the world simply because they couldn't see past their ego, their games, their brokenness. And now, as the dust settles, as the truth rises, as time unveils what karma was quietly orchestrating all along, you no longer feel the need to prove anything, not to them, not to the world, not even to yourself. Because your peace is the proof. Your silence is the statement. Your growth is the justice. So to the ones who hurt you, betrayed you, laughed at your pain, lied to your face, and turned their back on your love, this is your answer. Not in rage, not in revenge, but in the undeniable truth of who you've become. You were never broken beyond repair. You were becoming. And now they watch from a distance, left with the mess they created, while you walk in the light they tried to dim. You are no longer the wounded. You are the warrior. You are no longer seeking closure. You are the closure. And the greatest part of your story is that you didn't just overcome betrayal. You transcended it. They thought betrayal would break you. Now they're the ones shattered. Let them sit in the silence they gave you. Because now you don't just rise, you rise without them.